Hey soccer fans, Nick here with the Feed the Fire podcast. We are looking ahead to the Chicago Fire's matchup against CF Montreal this upcoming weekend, July 19th on the Saturday. They're coming off what I have been calling the turning point of the season. These last 2 weeks where they have played a lot of matches in a short period of time, going back to the beginning of July where they're taking on Cincinnati at Cincinnati, then going to Minnesota for a U.S. Open Cup game, then coming home to San Diego, and then traveling down to Atlanta, now up to Montreal. The way these 2 weeks play out for the Fire is going to, me, determine the success of this season. Now, I've said it in prior episodes, I think they should have rotated squads and de-emphasized matches against Cincinnati and San Diego to prioritize the U.S. Open Cup, their best chance at a trophy this season. But I do think that the club wants to make the playoffs, that was the marker they set at the beginning of the season, so they're going to stick to that. So, that being said, they have been going all out to get points on the road at Cincinnati, which they failed to do so. At home against San Diego, which they failed to do so, but they were able to lose a draw to Atlanta. Last-minute goal scored by Atlanta off a set piece allowed them to at least save a point at home, and the Fire to come back and have to settle for a point on the road despite having the majority of chances in that match. Now they take on a struggling CF Montreal team, but a team that seems to be on the rise. Make sure you go follow The Ball Is Round Montreal, TBIR Montreal, on social media. I did a sit down with them and went over this match in greater detail, broke down some tactics and things, so be on the lookout for that. But the host over there, Elias, he said Montreal is looking up. They're going to have a hard time replacing their defender George Campbell, who is probably not going to be in the lineup amid transfer rumors and imminent signings there, as well as an injury to Sam Piette. He may or may not play, or if he does, not a full 90. So they are down a couple of their featured defensive players there. However, they still are a team with some confidence and feeling better once they are back home now. Now, looking at this Montreal side, if you want to look at their form recently, and I got to scroll down the form guide a little bit, they are at the bottom of the standings right now. They have not had a good start to the season. They started with 3 straight losses. In fact, they didn't get their first win until May 10th, until match game 12. That was their first win of the season. They've only gotten 2 wins since then. However, in their last 5 games, it's been a win, a draw, and 3 losses. They have been on the road the last 2 weeks. They're going to enjoy being home. They're going to feel confident taking on a tired Chicago Fire squad. Now, if you want to look at some other numbers of the CF Montreal squad, they are sitting 15th in the East, and according to Supporter Shield standings, they are at the bottom of the league. They're on 15 points after 23 games played. Again, only 3 wins, 14 losses, 6 draws. They have a very leaky defense. 43 goals allowed is the second most in MLS, tied for most in the Eastern Conference with DC United. Only the Galaxy have allowed more goals in MLS this year at 45. And they've only scored 20 goals. That's a negative 23 goal differential. It's really hard to try and identify trends and stats and ways we can take advantage of this Montreal team if you're the Chicago Fire, because they have been so bad this entire season. Are we going to say, is this the game where they end up scoring 3 goals and only allowing 2, and that's how they win? That's a plausible outcome. Is this a game where the Fire bang in a 4-0 win? Also a plausible outcome. So when you have a team like Montreal and the season that they're having, and the player injuries that they're having, and just the attitude and mentality around the team, it's going to be tough to predict. And how do the Fire approach it? So I think the Fire are just going to approach it the way they always do. They're going to put out their choice 11 to start, try and get those 1 or 2 early goals, and then try and see the game out. Second half, hit on the counter if they can, bring in subs as needed. Now, looking at one of the players to keep an eye on from the Chicago Fire's perspective is forward for CF Montreal, Prince Owusu. We know the Chicago Fire have had struggles on defense, and in my conversation with Elias over at The Ball Is Around Montreal, he mentioned that they'll likely try to attack up the middle, attack the Chicago Fire defense, knowing that that is going to be a weakness. And Prince Owusu, if he is getting in his groove, he's going to get a goal. He even said, and when Montreal plays well, he scores. When Montreal plays poorly, he scores. And if we look back at his recent run of form, on the 16th against the Union, he scored. On the 12th against Orlando, he scored. In the Canadian Championship against Canadian Premier League team Forge FC, he had a brace. On July 5th against Inter Miami, he had a goal. Didn't score in the prior game against NYC, but he has scored now in 6 of his last 7 games across all competitions, including a brace against the Dynamo back on June 14th. So he is the player to watch for Montreal. Now, I do want to transition into what the Chicago Fire need to do, and I think the Fire need to be aggressive. That's the only way they know how to play at this point. I don't want to see them sit back and try to absorb pressure and really give Montreal the confidence to press and high press, especially when the Fire are trying to play out the back. I think the Fire, the way they played at home against San Diego and the way they played on the road against Atlanta should be the way they play against Montreal. Now, hopefully they execute a lot better, can get 1, probably 2 goals, hopefully, in that first half, score 3, maybe 4 goals on the match. But it is, I think, going to come down to the success of the wingers, as well as making sure the Fire can handle any sort of counterattack and get back in that defensive shape. And I'm absolutely looking at our 3 midfielders, at Pineda, Orahel, and at Gutierrez as well, who, as good as he can be going forward, got to attack as a team, got to defend as a team. And if you get Gutman or Barroso or Dean in kind of these overload situations out on the wings and they're just backpedaling, eventually, as you know, they're going to backpedal into their own goal, and it's just going to allow teams to tee off from 15 to 20 yards like we saw Maranchuk do in that Atlanta match. So if the Fire can put out their choice 11, get a goal or 2, and make Montreal chase the game, I think we're going to be in a lot better shape. However, if it is a close game, if the Fire are down a goal, if it's a draw going into that 60th, 70th minute, I do think the Fire have just enough off the bench to beat this Montreal team, and if they continue that style of play that we have become accustomed to over the course of this season. Now, and I said it on the show, 2-1. 2-1 victory for the Fire. That's my prediction. The Ball Is Around Montreal. Elias said 3-2, but he didn't say which way. He said, I can see Montreal winning 3-2, and I can see Chicago winning 3-2. So we both agree there's going to be goals in this match, but I've got the Fire coming out on top and hopefully steadying the ship to make a good push for the second half of the season, maybe get a little rest during the All-Star week, and then, again, make that final playoff push. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about in today's show was an article written by Matt Doyle over on MLSsoccer.com. It just came out Thursday, July 17th, and it is titled, What Every Eastern Conference Team Needs This Summer. So it's an eye on transfers. And here's what he writes about the Chicago Fire. Their biggest need is defensive midfield. The current roster model is the U22 initiative model, but they could switch to the DP model. They have 1 open DP slot or U22 slot, depending on their approach. Again, back to the roster rules. 2 DPs, 4 under 22s, or 3 and 3. So here is his actual breakdown of the Chicago Fire. And this does tie into what I was saying, that if Pineda and Orahel and Gutierrez are playing well, then the team seems to be playing well as a whole. We still have a very good offense with Bamba, Kuiper, Zinkernagel, Selassie off the bench, and if that midfield plays well, that will elevate the whole team. All right, back to Doyle's article here. The Fire have been one of the best attacking teams in the league this season and one of the worst defensive teams. Yep. There are several reasons for this. Both fullbacks take risks pushing up. There's been a constant stream of right center back partners for Jack Elliott, which Doyle refers to as the Spinal Tap drummers of MLS this season. And the goalkeeping has been up and down. The clearest one from what I've seen has been the struggles at D-mid. That's borderline shocking because I thought that'd be a position of strength this season. It hasn't been. Kellen Acosta has played fewer than 600 minutes. Romanique Kwame's gotten about half that. They reportedly spent $4 million on U22 signing Jay Davila, but the Ivorian has looked overwhelmed and off the pace most of the time he's been out there. Now, I will say he has had seen some improvement the last couple matches he's played, but then again, when you're starting with such a low bar, that's the only way to go, right? The only way to go is up. However, the Fire have done a pretty good job scouting lately, and I think if they're giving Jay the extra MLS minutes to get used to the match, as well as was pointed out by Men in Red 97, the guy's played on 4 different continents in the last 2 years. Maybe he just needs to catch his breath a little bit and figure out MLS, and hopefully he develops into a much better player next season. Okay, continuing on with the article. That's left the job mostly to Mauricio Pineda, who's a fine rotation player, but who's never become more than that. They've already spent so much on the spot, so I understand it's tough to throw more resources at it, but it remains a glaring need. Bigger, I'd say, than right center back. So he'd rather have a better D-mid to help cover up, say, a Sam Rogers or a Chris Cups as they're still getting adjusted to MLS. And yes, Doyle continues, they have a DP slot to potentially use. Everyone expects them to go big, but to me, they need a big, quote-unquote, Kevin De Bruyne-style big, far less than they need pitch control, orchestration, and a high-end shield for the back line. Note that this changes if they sell homegrown attacker Brian Gutierrez this summer. Do that, and their needs shift pretty hard toward the attack. So that's Doyle's analysis of what, if he were the Chicago Fire, what they should be looking to do. Bolster the midfield, especially the defensive mid position, because Kwame hasn't been coming along. Acosta's not getting minutes. I think a lot of that is due to Kwame's injuries. However, when he is on the pitch, it does look like he needs time to adjust and kind of figure things out a little bit. And you can still tell that he is having some communication issues with his teammates, maybe not getting in the exact right position. I think there was some time in the match against San Diego where he was like more on the wing and not available to receive the passes in the middle, was not making the right runs off the ball to get open to be an outlet to receive a pass. So he's got a lot to work on there. Another reason why I think Berhalter is, partly it's the way he wants to do it, but also partly he's forced to put his starting 11 out each and every week, not have the ability to rotate as much and try and get that early lead, where then these guys can be a little more comfortable, these bench players, role players can be a little more comfortable playing in defense. That's everything I'm going to say. I hope everyone has a great time up at Montreal for the match, for anyone who's going away. I know there is going to be a number of Chicago Fire away supporters there, so look out for everybody wearing red. Short episode today, just wanted to get you a little something before the weekend. Go out to your 7-Eleven this weekend while you're running around. Get a bottle of Skira Icelandic Spring Water, the company that has supported this show from day one, so show a little love back to them. And as always, let's go Fire.